The Boca Raton Historical Society and Museum, founded in 1972, is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to preserving the past to enrich the future. The Historical Society is building a legacy in our community by collecting and sharing our local history. The current project is documenting the Jewish history of Boca Raton.
I'm Shirley Enselberg, and I came to Boca Raton in 1971. Actually, it was April Fool's Day.
And I am Sandy Altner. I am a volunteer interviewer here with the Boca Raton Historical Society. We are at Lynn University, and it is November 9th, 2015. And I thank you so much for joining us for this oral history project of the Jewish community. And first of all, tell me a little bit about why it is that you came to Boca Raton.
We came to Boca Raton because my husband was in a medical practice in New York, and as a young doctor, it was pretty tough getting going. So we were fortunate to find out that a doctor in Deerfield had died and was selling his practice. As a result, my husband's mother encouraged him to come down and turn this offer down. He came down, and the next thing I knew, we were moving.
Were you thrilled?
No. I hated the thought.
Why was that?
Well, unfortunately, somebody had us meet with a rabbi in New York who told us that there were only 32 Jewish families in Boca Raton, and did we really want to leave the wonderful city that we lived in? And it was wasteland. So we came with that information, and in fact, I hate to say it, but Boca Raton was a little tiny town on the way to nowhere, and the things that we now see as Boca Raton were not here. The town actually stopped it just before 95, and there was nothing above 20th Street. It was just a small town. The biggest excitement was Howard Johnson's on the corner of Camino and Federal. If you wanted to go to dinner or something like that, you'd have to go somewhere else most of the time. There were some restaurants. I shouldn't sound like it was only one thing, but it was really a very small town.
And this was 1971?
1971, right.
Were there, in fact, just 32 Jewish families down here?
There were 32 known Jewish families, and they were the core of what is now Bethel. There was an itinerant rabbi that came once a month, and the rest of the time, when they did have services, they had lay leadership. From that community, there was another group that was started, what is now B'nai Torah, and it was started by Alan Markovitz and his wife. So that was the second synagogue that was started, but that was some years later. The biggest problem after a while was where were these places going to have a home? And there just weren't the numbers at that time. But as time went along, population began to grow.
Why do you think Boca Raton became attractive as a center for Jews to come to?
Well, I think the university was a draw. IBM was here in a very, very big way. The hospital was really just getting started. My husband was number 55 on the staff.
Which hospital?
Boca Raton Community Hospital. That was the only hospital at the time that was in the immediate area. There was North Broward, and then there weren't any hospitals between here and I think JFK. I mean, it was really a small town, and Boca Raton Hospital had really begun just a few years before. So it had a very small staff. We now have, I think, better than 1,000 doctors on staff. So it really was a little town with the Boca Raton Hotel as probably the only anchor. And I think people began to come down here during their vacations, and they thought it was kind of nice. And it was pretty. Slowly but surely it began to expand. Then we had growth out west with the estancias starting, and that created a whole other issue. There were legal issues about expanding There was a court case about the estancias, which stopped growth for a while. But the more people fought to get down here, the more they wanted to come.
When you first arrived then in 1971, Shirley, did you see, how would you describe the community? Very tiny, obviously, but what about the population?
Most of the population was from the Midwest. I would say we had people from Michigan and Ohio and Illinois. There were very few Jews here. In fact, I arrived in April of that year, and it was Passover, and there was nothing to be had in the grocery stores that even made you know that it was Passover. So I had to go to Fort Lauderdale in order to buy matzahs. There wasn't a thing here that even, sounded like it was aware. I mean, if you go to Publix today, there are all sorts of things that are available on all the shelves. But in 1971, that wasn't even on the agenda for any of the stores. There was really no recognition of other things going on.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your life was, your Jewish life, prior to coming to Boca Raton, and how it changed when you got here?
To be honest with you, as a young single and as a young married, it was probably not very, it was not a very important part of what I did, except that my nuclear family, my mom and dad, were observant, although not Orthodox, but observant. And my own personal involvement was very limited. I just knew I was Jewish in a very large Jewish community.
What community was that?
I lived in Manhattan.
Okay, so I guess my question is, was there a particular affiliation that your family had to a synagogue?
My parents belonged to a synagogue, to a conservative synagogue.
A conservative?
One that's closer to Orthodoxy, but in the conservative camp. Men and women sat together, and but the liturgy and everything was really much more traditional.
Was it a very important part of your home life as a child?
Mm-hmm.
So when you came to Florida, obviously all of the traditions and everything that you had been comfortable with, suddenly there was an absence of those traditions, I understand.
Right. So it was a matter of either we did it or we didn't do it, and we did it as little as possible. We observed holidays because we had to go to a synagogue. And until I had children, we didn't do very much of anything.
Did children arriving change things
Absolutely.
for you?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Well, my first child was born in 1974. That wasn't so much of an issue early on, but it occurred to me that there was nothing that I could pass along to her in the way of tradition, because there were no institutions that I could find to plug into. And then I had another child in 76. By that time, we had already begun to create a Jewish the Jewish Federation was an we were an offspring of the Palm Beach Federation, and then eventually split off in 1979, I believe. Probably should check those numbers. And when the Federation started down here in this community as an independent community, we had to create institutions to go along with that. As a result, in 1979, it became apparent that we needed to do something about Jewish education. And that's when we started the Jewish Day School, what was then called the South County Jewish Community Day School.
And where was that located?
At Bethel. So we were housed in actually 3 classrooms and an office space. We had 50 kids to start. And that's the nucleus for what today is the Donna Klein Jewish Academy.
The Donna Klein Jewish Academy then grew from this tremendous desire that you and other people that you joined with, led, to create that Jewish education experience. How important was that to, take me through how that actually got going? What was your role exactly in bringing this to a reality?
I think I beat the drums, made a lot of noise, contacted as many people as I could who were in the age group of those people who had children that would at least start with us. There was a day school in West Palm, and that day school had had a good deal of success, and they were willing to give us seed money to start. So we went repeatedly to their meetings saying, you got to get us started. And they did. Then we split off, which created other issues, but then it was a matter of getting this community to buy into it. And that was an uphill slog. I mean, there was no question about it. It had to do with money, it had to do with space. The good news is that it began to go very slowly, and we had setbacks. For every step forward, there were 2 steps back. But eventually, when the Jewish campus was built, we were able to we had a standalone building that is now what you see. And there are now over 600 children in that school, which is really something to be lauded. But besides that, it spawned other schools. There are any number of other Jewish day schools because it began to be something that other families saw as important. So you've got Hillel, and you've got the Yeshiva High School, you've got Torah Academy. I can't even name some of the other places that have now grown up, but this is something that obviously the younger families have felt the need for. And of course, the Federation helped us to do a lot of what was going on at the time. So there were several different sources that impacted this movement. And then in addition to that, you've got Jewish Family Services, you've got JARC, you've got all sorts of things that we were able to fund in this community that made for a really fulfilling Jewish life.
When we go back to those early days when you were first here, and then all of a sudden you have a young family and you have this great need then to establish the traditions, as you were saying, in your children's lives as well. How difficult was that? Were there other families around that you could partner with that were also of a like mind to start getting this ball rolling?
Some of my best friends today are the people that were part of the school early on and are now my children's contemporary. I mean, there's a whole history now. In fact, some of our grandchildren are playmates kind of thing. There were people that we met over the years that had, a certain commonality. My husband's a doctor, so there were people who were New York doctors who had come down and who themselves were part of that, that New York experience, and were looking for something. B'nai Torah, the congregation that we ended up belonging to, has a lot of people that we became very close friends with, and it reinforces what it was that I was particularly concerned with. My husband, on the other hand, has learned the hard way. He got added to the list of what had to be, how to do things. He was not he was not originally part of the whole business of wanting to do this, but he came along.
When you start looking at those early days and how much it has changed in all of those years, what is it that you think drew and attracted the Jewish community, particularly from New York in those early days, to come here? So you come to a community that's largely people who come from the Midwest. There are very few Jewish families here. And today, of course, it's a very different kind of thing. What was that initial impetus to bring Jewish families, to attract them?
I think you've got a multiple factors. You've got synagogues that are now viable and freestanding institutions. You've got a federation that's very, very active. You've got, for example, the Orthodox community. You've got kosher stores. There are a number of levels at which it became important for people. The synagogues were obviously a place where a lot of people felt strongly. But, and then of course, your friends came, or, people came because for example, in our case, my mother-in-law lived in Florida first, and that was what drew us. And then my family came after that because we were here. So you have this phenomenon where somebody's mom and dad are here, and then the next generation comes down. And then if you're lucky, you also are able to work down here and create either a profession or a business that works well, because there was there was nothing here. So there was lots of room for people to develop if they knew what it was that was needed. There are a lot of people in this community who have made a great deal of money because they came when this place was relatively undeveloped.
When you look at those years, those early years, and going from the few families and so on, how long did it take to really start to take hold where you started to realize, wow, there really is a Jewish community that has every promise of being a vibrant, strong, growing Jewish community here?
I would say that somewhere in the late 80s, we began to really have, a concentration here. In my mind, we're like the Vilna of Poland down here. You've got tremendous choices in terms of your Jewish experience. The synagogues are as varied as one wants, and one can do as much or as little in the community in terms of participation. So there were many alternatives to how one practices one's being Jewish, not necessarily observance, but Jewish, living Jewishly. You go to the mall, and there are Hanukkah decorations all over the mall. You go on any of the streets, there are things that recognize that there is another holiday other than Christmas. So,
at a certain point, when it grew to being substantial, then it became a very different kind of community, I would imagine, in terms of its appeal as people from northern climates are looking to come and enjoy a different kind of a lifestyle. What do you think are the primary motivating factors from the late 80s on that have brought the Jewish community here? And why so many from New York?
I think it's catchy. They've heard that it's a nice place to live. The weather's good. Of course, the fact that it's been so cold up north has certainly added to this whole business of making people move. I have friends who are now moving here in numbers that I never thought were going to happen. I think we're a visible, identified group. We started, there were 2 synagogues. I think we have 12, 13, 14 synagogues between Delray, and it may even be more than that. You can do anything you want if you want to be Jewish. And if you don't want to be Jewish, you can sit in the sun and play golf all day. So there are choices here that are quite lovely.
You talked a little bit about the support that you saw from the outset and the fact that there was an opportunity for people to make money. This gives us a real solid base for philanthropy. How important has philanthropy been to the development of Boca Raton?
Well, I think with the Jewish Federation here, it created opportunities to develop institutions. The Federation originally, when it started, was really an umbrella for all of the Jewish institutions that we had created. It was in charge of the JCC, Jewish Family Service, the Day School, JARC, and all of those. Eventually they spun off. But it was an opportunity to create institutions that, as it turns out, have been long-lasting. And the money that Federation has raised over the years is what has kept those alive. And those are not institutions that really do well. They're kind of tough to handle on a freestanding basis because it's expensive to run all these places. Fortunately, the day school is in a better position because we get tuition. All the others are really on a fee-for-service basis, and Federation has really been in some ways, the bank.
Tell me about Donna Klein.
Tell you about Donna Klein. Donna Klein is a K through 12 academic setting. secular and Judaic studies, and the level of academic standing is phenomenal. Our kids do very well, and we now have a high school with 150 kids in it, which is terribly exciting because getting kids to come to a high school is, especially a Jewish high school, is something that was a challenge in this community. So for the numbers to be that great right now is terrific. We don't have any more room, apparently. And our students do extremely well and go off to really very fine colleges. Academically, it's a star.
How was that accomplished? I mean, it's something to be tremendously proud of.
Hard work, a lot of people putting a lot of time in, really good teachers, strong leaders. Federation has been a support, but also the philanthropic community in general, outside, I shouldn't say outside, there's philanthropy within the school that allows it to do what it needs to do. It always needs money. It's a very tough curriculum because you're dealing with two curriculums that have to be paid for, and it's very expensive. Unfortunately, a lot of our families are not in a position to pay full tuition, so we need to have a lot of scholarship.
Donna Klein has also been able to attract, over the years, just the top of the top in educators as well. What has been the mission, really, of Donna Klein to be able to offer this fine education to Jewish students in this community?
The mission is to create feeling, learned Jewish students who will carry forward their Judaism and their identity with Israel, and who are capable of taking a leadership role in the community. And hopefully they will become Jewish leaders. That's really the goal. And they are usually, they are just wonderful. I hope I can take you to see them one day if you have the time. I would love to show you around.
How has the Donna Klein School influenced education in Palm Beach County? How has it made an influence on and the desires of the parents, the support that has come to this, the pursuit of excellence, if you will? Because there has been an overspill to other schools, I would say, in Palm Beach County in particular. There has been an influence on the secular schools.
Well, I think the academic standards are high. But I think the thing that I'm impressed with is the fact that with Donna Klein starting as a full standing day school, there were other schools that people wanted for their children because of their own way of practicing their Judaism. For example, Hillel is more observant in practice because they do provide a Jewish education for a different segment of the community. Donna Klein is what we call a community day school, so we are kind of a larger umbrella. I think the day school has become an example of what good education has to be, and it is the model for all the other schools in the community to follow suit. I don't think we're looking at shabby. And for that reason, I think we all stand to be proud for what has been established.
It is one of the cultural main pillars, if you will, the idea of a solid education to a Jewish community. Has that changed at all in the years since you were a young child?
I think it's just gotten stronger. I think we demand more of our education than ever before. And while we're doing that, we're also asking our kids to become more and more integrated into not only the American lifestyle, but also commitment to Israel. So you've got there's a lot riding on creating an education that works. We don't want them to be so closed in. We want them to be available to be part of the larger American community.
I want to go back to when you first came and whether, I mean, it was interesting to hear that it was very difficult at Passover. You couldn't find what you needed to be able to have your own traditional expectations met. But when you were first here, did you also feel that there was anti-Semitism that you had to face?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, the first realtor we dealt with was a man who said, the people next door to you are very noisy. And you know, they're Jewish. And I hope you're not going to be like that. So they happen to be Italians, but that was the way he was portraying us. And then we moved to Royal Palm, which was at that time considered a closed community. And we were told that it would be very hard for us to be approved for a house.
Closed? A closed community? What did that mean at that time?
It meant that there were no Jews in the community, but there were. I don't know that anybody knew about it, but nominally it was thought that there were no Jews that were being accepted in the community. And of course, some years later, there was a suit that was brought against the clubhouse because they would not accept members into the clubhouse. And that was tried in the courts and they threw it out.
In what year was that?
I don't know the years. Okay. I think somebody may have that for you.
Okay.
That could be checked.
But in the 70s, in the 80s, you were feeling anti-Semitism here?
Earlier, yes. We were just out of that era where the signs in the Boca Raton Hotel were no Jews or dogs. That was early. I think that may have been in the 60s, but there was still that overlay. The Arvida Corporation was not very welcoming. We had no problem getting in. I don't actually know why. Although the person who we used as a reference was the controller of Saks Fifth Avenue stores. So I don't know whether that made any difference. But we had no trouble. But everyone suggested that it would be a problem.
Were you of the mind that in regular dealings in grocery stores and so on, did you find that there was an anti-Semitism expressed in that way?
No, not that way. It sounded like it was more institutional than anything else. People were very kind. That was not an issue at all. It was just, the aura. As I said, there was nothing in the stores that I could buy that was even Jewish. And one of the things that happened many years after was they had Hanukkah paper wrap, gift wrap for the holidays. And when I came into Publix one day, I saw that they had a huge amount of it. And I said to the manager, "What are you doing with this?" And he said, "I don't know what to do with it. I can't sell this." I said, "Great, I'll take it off your hands. I will use it at the day school as a fundraiser, and we'll take it." So it was 50 cents on the dollar or something that he gave it to me. But he couldn't move it. There was nobody buying. So that was what was going on. That's changed, obviously. You go in the stores and you've got everything that you want that's Jewish if you want it.
What makes Boca Raton so appealing as a Jewish community today in 2015?
I think you've got anything you want in the way of choices. There's a full range. You've got the range of synagogues. You've got theater. We just had a wonderful experience this past weekend with Ann and Byron being honored. We were part of something called the March of the Living. It's very well supported. We did a Jewish film festival for what is called Kristallnacht, and it was wonderfully attended. We had 2 showings of the film. It's been supported financially. It's been supported by people showing up and filling the Zinman Hall, which is where we showed the film. So there's support for things like that.
When you look at the changes in the community, and particularly the impact on young people, what is your sense, Shirley, of whether Judaism is here to stay when you're seeing what you're learning from young people and their feelings toward their Judaism, their lives as Jews?
Well, I think there are two things. One is you've got youth groups and all sorts of youth activities that are right here on the spot. My children did not have that. Just weren't enough kids at the time. But there are wonderful opportunities for youth. But more than that, we also have wonderful preschools. This whole community has created Jewish preschools, and that's really, in many ways, the hope for the Jewish community is if we can snag them when they're early and young, we can hopefully get the families to buy into the concept of having a Jewish education as part of their life, and if not, at least to commit them to the Jewish community.
Do you have any fears that the Jewish community will weaken?
No, it's going to be different. We have a different way of doing things. I think we want things to be the way we lived it. I don't think our younger families will live that way. Some of them may, but I think they want a different brand that's more user-friendly and that can address the kind of lives they live. They're very busy, but it needs to be part of their life if they want it. And it's a different way of practicing our Judaism. The Orthodox community will probably perpetuate itself that way. The rest of the community is going to want a different answer. But if we can start them off when they're very young, at least we stand a good chance. I have two little grandsons. I'm hoping something will stick with them.
When you think about what you were seeking for your children when you and your husband first came down and had a young family, and do you see now what you wanted to achieve?
Oh, absolutely. To see the institutions that we've created here is absolutely phenomenal to me. I would never in a million years have believed that any of these things would have survived or been viable. I mean, we've lost some things along the way, I'm sure. Unfortunately, some of our synagogues are not able to survive because membership has, they've lost membership. But we're going to have to recreate different ways of doing what we had been doing. And I think that's really the challenge for our younger Jewish community, is to continue to survive, but to adapt to a different way of living.
Shirley, may I ask you some questions about your childhood?
Sure.
Your sense of the importance of what you have in this community today and the work that you put into this is not just out of just your desire for your family. I think it does relate to your experiences as a child. Can you tell us what happened where you were?
I was a hidden child. I was born in Belgium, and the war created a situation where it was unsafe for children to be with their families. And so I was placed in a convent for a while, became very seriously ill, and was removed from the convent because I had diphtheria, or I was a carrier of diphtheria. I was then placed with a family in the countryside because to have lived in the city would have been dangerous for everyone involved. And I was raised by a Christian family, and I didn't know my family when they returned. Fortunately, they lived through the war. And in 1945, they came back to claim me.
How old were you?
I was about 4 or so.
And when they left you?
I was about 1.5 years. No, I was closer to 2.
So from 2 until 4, you were raised by a Christian family.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories of that?
Mm-hmm. They were a lovely farm family. We were in the countryside. It was, a bucolic existence. I was a country bumpkin, really. But it was the country and away from what was going on in the cities, which was terribly dangerous. The Germans were rounding up people all the time, and it was not safe on the streets. There was no food. My parents were, imminent danger at any time.
Where were your parents during that time?
They were in Brussels. They were in the apartment that they lived in at the time. They lived in a corner of their apartment. Apparently they had created some kind of a wall that they lived behind. And we don't know how it was that they were saved, but they were. Just the way it is. And it just happened. And fortunately they survived.
And then they came and got you.
Then they came and got me. And then...
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Can you tell me about it?
They came to get me, and I fell on a railroad bed and scraped my knees. And to this day, I have these ashes in my knee. I didn't know who they were, though. They were people that had just come to get me. I mean, my real family was this family that I had left.
Where did you go with your parents then?
I went back to Brussels with them. They were able then to live in their apartment again the way they had in the past. And we stayed in Brussels until 1948, and they came to the United States.
Why did they come to the States?
My mother's family was here. She had a brother, and her own parents had come in 1946. They had been in Belgium as well, and they were able to get on the first ship to the United States after the war. So they came here, and my mother wanted to be reunited with them. So she came. She and my father and my sister and I came, and shortly thereafter, her two brothers came as well. So her whole nuclear family was reunited. She had lost one sister in the war, but that family was reunited in New York.
So it must have been very daunting for you to think that Boca Raton was a good place to go.
It was awful. It was such a mistake. I was so upset. I had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but I was a newlywed, and I went with my husband with the idea that we were going to find some way to make this thing work. I had no clue as to what we were in for. I mean, I had lived in the city for years. It just was not what I had planned.
How long did it take before you came around to the idea that you weren't pining to go back?
25 years. No, I don't think it was that long. But it was way, way longer. I mean, we would go to New York in every couple of months to kind of get rejuvenated early on. Not when the kids came, but prior to that, we were on that plane with a weekend in the city just to kind of get back all of our juices.
Shirley, when we think about all of these changes that you've been through in your life, I really see a woman of such accomplishment, such, like you have a tremendous amount of determination with the things that you wanted to achieve. What are you most proud of that the Jewish community has been able to do here?
One is the school, which is really my pride and joy. I feel that is just phenomenal. I didn't get the last 600 kids to come, but for the school to have lasted, when we started in '79 with barely a budget or anything that was, no bricks and mortar, nothing. We were foster kids, so to speak. For the school to have lived and survived all this time with all the adversity, and there were things that went on. For that to survive is really, I am so pleased with that. But more than that, when I look around this community, there is so much happening. This is not a dying community. This is a very exciting place to be in. I'm very comfortable here. I finally moved here. I'm very pleased with what has been developed. I never saw it coming, not early on. But I have been here to see everything grow. I've been involved with synagogues. I've been involved with agencies. I've been involved with as many institutions as I can think of. If I wasn't at the beginning of the institution, I was there as it grew. So it's really rewarding to see that we really have become an entity. And I think Boca Raton is now, one of the most envied communities in this country. People want to come, but there's more stuff going on here than it's hard to believe.
How important is the philanthropy in the Jewish community?
I think it keeps everything afloat. And it needs to do better in terms of reaching people. The numbers of people that we reach is really not so great. But those people that do share are very, very, they are to be lauded.
Do you have any concerns, Shirley, about the future of young people in the Jewish community in Boca Raton? It seems to me that there are so many people who are worried that, okay, their kids come here, they have fantastic educational opportunities, Jewish education opportunities, and then they go off to these fantastic colleges for which they have been prepared, and many of them don't come back. What are your thoughts about where the young Jewish community is? Are they coming? Are they making their lives here? Do you see people staying?
Do you mean coming back to Boca Raton, or taking their lives elsewhere and living a particular way?
I'm thinking about the people that are going off to college now, who are being prepared to go off to college. Do you think they'll come back to Boca, or will they just stay away?
Surprisingly, and this is not a scientific study, but surprisingly, the number of kids who started out here, left the community, and lived elsewhere for a while, you'd be surprised at how the number of them who have come back and decided to make this their home. Having said that, I think it's our responsibility for the students that leave here to have something that they can take with you. So it is our responsibility as a community to make them good Jews, so that it's one of those things that's portable. You don't have to have it in anything big. We need to prepare them for what's out there. I think it's tough on the kids that go to college and are faced with anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism and the kinds of things that they're exposed to. We need to prepare them for that. That's not an easy job. And I don't know that we have done a great job doing that. I think that's part of, as I see it, that's one of the biggest responsibilities we have. We've not done a great job in doing that. We need better preparation for the kids that we send out.
I have one last question for you. When we look at the relationship between Boca Raton and Israel, we see many, many, many people who have traveled to Israel, have a relationship with Israel, have relatives in Israel. Do you think that's something that is solid for the future? Will there always be a connection between Israel and Boca Raton?
That's an interesting question. I think we have a problem with our young people. I don't know that they have the same kind of ties to Israel that previous generations have had. They have not grown up with the State of Israel, with the start of the State of Israel. They don't necessarily have a tie to Holocaust, and there are other things that come to mind when it comes to their allegiances. We have to do a lot of work to create a bond. Birthright is one of the things that we've done with kids. We send them for 2 weeks and they come back completely changed. But it's the kind of thing that Birthright does to these kids that identify them with Israel. I think that's one of our big problems that we have to keep working at. The young generation is not that identified, and that's really where our work should be at this point, and where probably our philanthropic monies should go as well.
Okay, I lied. It wasn't the last question.
You've got one more.
I do, because I find you to be such a fascinating woman, and I'm just wondering, when you think about that young woman who was freshly married and whose husband said, let's go to Boca, would your life have been substantially different if you didn't face those challenges? And what are you most pleased with that you had the opportunity to do here?
I've been thinking about that, and we talked about that yesterday. I think it's just the idea that we were on the ground floor of almost everything here. If we had lived in New York, I don't know where one goes to do anything from the beginning because it's already there. Here, we were in on the ground floor. We created everything that there was. I chaired a federation women's campaign. I was a president of the day school. I've been a vice president of this, and I've sat on committees, and I've had titles, and I just didn't have a bigelow on the floor, but I had, my name on the door. We've been able to have been here at the inception of everything there was. And I think that's the interesting thing. That's where the challenges have been, that it was all brand new and we were creating. We had no history, and we just carved out these things as they needed to be carved out.
Shirley Enselberg, I am so pleased to have had the opportunity to talk with you today. And now you're going to be having to see me again sometime, I'm sure.
Okay, not a problem.
It's a pleasure. Thank you on behalf of the Boca Raton Historical Society and the Federation and Lynn University, who has been so helpful in getting us going with these interviews here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.